what happens when you start doing the work, where it's like you feel like you're doing all this stuff internally, and then you do the movement and it's something different. And you're like, oh, fuck. Now I really don't trust myself because what I'm seeing out in reality is very different than inside. And so there's a temporary phase of that where it gets worse, where you're like, wow, I just don't trust anything. Then eventually, through the entrainment of all those reference points of what is actually real, you trust yourself more than you could have ever imagined you could. But there is that temporary phase. Through the entrainment of these reference points, you are building a more functional internal compass, internal navigation system, where you're like, oh, bad feels bad, good feels good, sad feels sad, lonely feels lonely, joyous feels joyous, attack feels like attack. And you start getting that functional compass and map built out in your nervous system and your energy system. And then when you're out in life, you're like, oh, that didn't feel good. Oh, good. That shouldn't feel good because that was cruel. Okay, that felt good. Oh, and I can let that in now. Oh, I'm not letting it in. Ooh, okay, how do I let that in? Because I know it's good now. You start being able to see reality for what it is. You start to know what is what without the distortions and filters and crazy stuff going on. And then that makes life so much easier because you're like, oh, okay, he thinks he's completely clueless that what he just said was mean. Okay, but it was mean because I know what that feels like. Okay, no, I'm not being sensitive. Am I taking it personally? Okay, I'm taking it personally. Right, if I don't take it personally, it still hurts, but it's not a big deal. It's not about me. It's his stuff. You can't do that when you don't know. If you're like, I don't know, was it my fault? His fault? It's always my fault. You don't know. Building this map, this internal map of reality is very important, especially coming from a place where your map isn't super functional. I've mapped those out by feedback, by seeing myself, by getting the results in my life, by seeing other people's results, and being around people that, let's say, had one of those down. Oh, that's what it feels like for that person to be very certain. Oh, and every time they're doing that, they're right. Okay, mapping that and just doing this thousands of times over 7 years, those resonance centers have developed very strongly. So I can look at somebody telling me a story, a client, and as a client I normally trust, it's just kind of at this point, then all of a sudden something goes ding down here. I'm like, I don't trust what you're saying. I have no idea why. What you said seems great. Something's off about it. How do I know? No clue, except that little ding ding down there. You're building these muscles, building these resonant points, and you start trusting them. And the more you trust them, you start trusting them when you know they're trustable. Because if you got a resonance point that says love is abuse, and then abuse is love, you trust those, you're in trouble. You got to switch them first through the fixing the reverse wiring, and then get enough reference points that say, okay, these are properly wired now in my nervous system, my energy system, and then you can start trusting them, and then they're trustable. But what happens oftentimes is people don't realize they have those distortions and those miswirings, and they're like, every time I trust myself, something bad happens. And then so they're like, intuition's bullshit, I can't trust it. It's not the case, it's just that you have these miswirings or filters or distortions going on. So when you can get those wired correctly and heal through those things, then those become more trustable than anything else. I trust these more than the science or the authorities or the government or the academics or the teachers, because I also know a point. It doesn't mean I'm always right, but I also know the point where it's, I don't know. I think this person probably knows more than me, so let me trust them. I know the feeling of, pretty sure about this. Then I have the feeling of, I don't know, but let's find out. And then I have the feeling of, no, this is completely wrong. No, don't do this. There's maybe a few more gradations to it. So about 5 of these main resonant points that I can take an idea or a concept and just plug them into. It's like tuning a guitar. You have a note, A, whatever, it's probably not A, but A, and then you go, ooh, all right, that's different. But you're just kind of tuning, seeing which note your feeling or idea or intuition or what somebody's saying to you, compare it to those automatically, and then it's, oh, all right, what's this one? Oh, it's that one. And then from that, understanding that resonance point, That's your judgment system. The more I trust it, the more it trusts me, and the stronger that muscle gets, and the easier it gets to use. And then you say, okay, I thought it was this, but my experience, what manifested was a little over here. Okay. And then so next time you do it, maybe it gets closer to here. Next time, maybe it's back here. Oh, the next time, okay. And then eventually over time, it locks in and it gets resonant. And so you have it properly mapped. And then from then on out, you trust that. You also have to be aware if you have other filters or ego. It's like you have that resonance point, but sometimes it's hard to hear because let's say it's your family. And listening to your mom, you have this whole stack of things that you have to penetrate through to get an accurate read, because it rings here, but then it goes blah, 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 through the traumas and the filters and distortions, judgments, whatever, and ends up a different note. It's like a music. You put it through effects like reverb and chorus and all these different things. It comes out different. And so what we're doing in this work is literally removing these filters so this message comes through clean. And that's really the process of emotional intelligence. That's how it works. Your intuition, this internal guidance, this map system. That's kind of how it's built.